But what's important, I think, for this episode, which you can bring up, and we're not going to go again, we try to talk about orthopedics, sports all the time.
Yeah.
But I do want to bring up a little data because this is really interesting. Because, like, even as an orthopedic surgeon, I can fire off my opinion, right? My opinion is this is not a good injury. My opinion is not going to recover. And patients, that stuff, they understand. I got experience. I see these things. But the data doesn't lie. And so it's really interesting to see the data because we're so used to seeing, like, the one or two athletes that get back. But what about the guys in the practice squad? What about the guys on the, that are not the starters? How do they get back from these injuries? Because really, they're the ones that, we talked about before, like an injured LeBron James is better than most of the players on the court.
Yeah.
Right. But an injured professional player is no longer a good player. Right. So how long does it take them to get back, and can they get back? And this may segue into our discussion of our controversial quarterback, Daniel Jones, and his ACL tear. But, there's two articles we'll talk about. So the first article is really easy to kind of go over, but basically it looks at return to play. So return to football in the NFL for wide receivers. Now, it's not Dan Jones, a quarterback, but I looked these up because for this show, I was like, well, I want to know, because I know Will and I are going to talk about what do we think Dan Jones is going to get back? What's his performance going to be like? And I was like, well, I'm sure someone's looked at this, right? Like, you want to know this data. So the wide receivers was interesting. A wide receiver, Achilles, patella, and ACL are the greatest effect on the career. And actually, they do have a decrease in success after 1 year of surgery. And what's interesting, so we always talk about the 1 year mark, but I always tell patients, remember we talked about this, Will, other than the Adrian Peterson absurdity, which we saw, most players are not better the first year they're back. And they're not at their full level. And it takes, Saquon Barkley, right? Obviously, it's kind of a dirty word now for New York. But they found that, it takes a second year, and sometimes they don't get back. And of the four major sports, NFL players, so the hockey, football, basketball, and baseball, the NFL, the shortest careers afterwards, and the highest decrease in performance after ACL injuries. So it's just something for people to be aware of. But if you're a New York Giants fan, you'll like the second article. Second article is same guy, Burgess et al. And they found that there is no significant decrease in performance for ACL reconstruction for quarterbacks. So that is a good thing for us to hear. And maybe the mental side of things, but not for the physical. So running backs, wide receivers, we added running backs, decreased performance. But for some reason, quarterbacks do not have a decrease in performance afterwards. And it's probably because what's their main use of their bodies? It's their arms, right? They have to have aims, they have to have core, but they're not doing the same thing. A running back, wide receiver, that explosive speed. We've seen Odell Beckham Jr., 2 ACLs. They're not as good the second time, and it takes longer. And these guys are freak athletes. So
yeah, and just to let our listeners know, these are studies going back. They reviewed it from 1988 to 2017, so it's a large chunk of data that they were able to make a reference to for the numbers that Dr. Garcia just explained. Go ahead, Dr. Garcia. You're going to say something.
Well, we're going to make this even more complicated because I like to do this.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about this, we didn't have the new ACL techniques we do. I just read an article yesterday, and Will's going to get too excited when I tell him this. So I'm going to say it quickly, and hopefully we can move on from the topic.
We're going to move on.
Adding internal brace.
Boom!